And I'm not going to take a lot of time because I know we've got a couple of people who need to speak. And Dr. Lee, did you want to come up, or Charlie? Charlie's next. Okay.
Just wanted to say a word. Chuck Gibson. I'm
so can you this so that we are. Yes.
That'd make a good mustache, wouldn't it?
This is only for that our recording session.
Okay. Sorry. Chuck Gibson. I'm the president of the board for the museum here. And when I first started with Brian and the staff here, we were wondering where we were going, and we've come a long way. But you know what? That's nothing compared to where it's going to go. And the museum here is designed to bring science activities, enlightenment to the community, trying to get schools involved, but citizens. And hey, it's my pleasure to help serve and do anything I can. Welcome tonight, Dr. Lee. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my name is Wei Li. I'm a professor of urban planning from Texas A&M University, and I am the director for Center for Geospatial Sciences, Applications, and Technology. My friendship with Nolanville started over 10 years ago. So over the past 10 years, I had the privilege to work with a lot of people, a lot of citizens here, leaders, community organizers together, and we were able to turn a lot of exciting technologies, smart city technologies, into a very meaningful solutions that not only provide services to people here in Nolanville, but also inspired so many students from Texas A&M and beyond. So I want to say a couple of things about the Center for Geospatial Sciences, Applications, and Technology. It's short for GeoSAT. So this is a center located at Texas A&M University. The center aims to transform education about geospatial sciences, not only limited to the boundary of campus, but also to open it up and inspire people of all ages. So the center integrates service and teaching and research. So we are very passionate about implementing participatory research projects in which we will be able to engage citizens from the great city of Nolanville and cities like Nolanville to work together to initiate projects and generate knowledge and share the knowledge. So, and this center would not be possible without the very hard work of one very important person, so my great colleague, Dr. Xinyue. So Dr. Xinyue is an expert in geospatial sciences, so he has laid a very solid foundation for the center to thrive. He is a co-director of the center. And this event today is amazing because it is an opportunity for us to share knowledge, to have the world-renowned expert to tell us stories, to inspire us with knowledge. I want to say thank you to Brian, to Teresa, and to all the staff, volunteers from the city of Nolanville, from the Smart Museum, and from Texas A&M University, particularly in the Department of Landscape Architecture, the College of Architecture, Texas Target Communities, as well as the Hagler Institute for Advanced Studies. So thank you guys very, very much for the hard work to make this event happen. Now it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Michael Goodchild, the superstar today that we have. Yes. So Dr. Goodchild is a globally renowned expert in the Geographic Information Sciences. He is recognized as the father of Geographic Information Sciences. So if you probably do not know what is the Geospatial Sciences, think about the last time you used Google Maps to navigate to places. And without the pioneering work of the Goodchild and a lot of other pioneers, this technology would not be possible. So Dr. Goodchild coined the term of volunteered geographic information system that encourages the citizens to work together to create wonderful data sets and resources and networks. So he has inspired interdisciplinary collaboration in GIS, in computer science, urban planning, and other disciplines, geography, a lot of other disciplines. He's recognized for his prestige and expertise and his impact by being the member of the National Academy of Sciences, member of American Academy of Arts and Sciences, fellow of the Royal Society, and also fellow of the British Academy. So please join me and give a round of applause to Dr. Michael Goodchild.
Okay. Right. And can I advance?
Dr. Goodchild, would you like a navigator? Would you like?
If you could just tell me which key do I?
Turn down the lights.
Let's see.
There we go.
There you go.
No?
I'm not a Dropbox person. Are you a Dropbox person?
Can you sit in the middle, right over here, and then we have to move the computer.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
Okay.
There we go. All right. All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. It's quite an experience for me to be here. I've been spending 10 days at Texas A&M in College Station, and this came up as a potential field trip to come see some of the things that they've been doing with this community and to talk about some of my ideas for the use of these technologies in local communities. So I want to start by explaining how I got into this. And this is an illustrative slide of, that's actually me, those are my boots. It's in a cave in West Virginia, and it really is the connection between my growing up in England, going to Cambridge to do a degree in physics, and then to end up doing geography and GIS. And the connection is here. My parents started me, when I was a teenager, started me exploring caves. They thought it would calm me down. It would help my teenage years. And I really got fascinated. And so I decided when I finished at Cambridge, I found that there was a professor in Canada, in Hamilton, Ontario, who was starting a research group in caves. And I thought, what a wonderful idea. I'll go and do a PhD in caves. And this was in 1965, at a time when the world was wide open, and a crazy idea like that made a lot of sense. I had no idea where it would end up, but it turned out to end up in an enormously interesting area. So this meant going to Canada and joining the Department of Geography at McMaster University, and it meant spending the first no, I wouldn't need to. Oh. There we go.
Push that arrow down. You got it.
So here's me on a glacier in Banff National Park, and this was my first summer season in Canada, in which we discovered and explored what turned out to be the longest cave in Canada. And we can go inside. That's actually me there, exploring a large passage in this cave. And there's me and one of the other explorers. And this was a fascinating cave. It's about 36 degrees Fahrenheit. It begins with a crawl over ice, and it goes on for about 10 miles of cave passage and ends up underneath the Columbia ice field, underneath about 2,000 feet of ice.
Can I see if I can expand that because they want to see your pictures?
Oh,
Let me see.
yeah.
Let's see. And I don't have my glasses on, so that tells my age.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Excellent. All right. So at one point, the cave is sufficiently long that we actually had to camp inside the cave for a period of about a week. So imagine not seeing daylight for a week and what that does to your eyes. When you come out, everything looks totally different. It's amazing. It's also very tricky because the only place in this cave that's sufficiently flat to lay a sleeping bag is only about that much from the ceiling. So if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're not clear where you are, you're going to bang your head against the rock above your head. So this was how I got into geography. And this is a winter picture. This is in another cave in the Canadian Rockies, full of ice and absolutely beautiful in terms of the ice formations that are there. So that started me out in geography. And I really had very little idea of what I was going to do. But when I started taking courses in geography, I realized I was at a very exciting point in time when people were just starting to put maps into computers. This was the very beginning of what we now do with Google Maps, right? We use it all the time. But in 1965, this was just beginning. And so if we go a little bit fast forward, let's go now to the early 2000s. So by this point, people had got quite used to putting maps in computers. And a graduate student at University College London decided that it would be very sensible if he and his friends could make their own maps. One of the things that was driving it was that maps like this in the UK at that time, maps of London, would have cost you £3 million to buy if you wanted to build systems based on digital maps. And he said, we can do this for free. We can just go out there, bunch of friends, we'll take our smartphones, we'll walk down the streets or bike down the streets, we'll upload the data, and we'll build a digital map. And so he and his friends started something which is now called OpenStreetMap. It's free, it's digital, and you can use it for whatever you like. And within a year or so, they had completed essentially the coverage of the United States, the coverage of Europe, and the coverage of most of the world. By 2010, when there was a big earthquake in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince, and the US Army went in to help deal with the earthquake, the OpenStreetMap turned out to be the best source of data, even better than the official sources that the US Army relies on. Volunteers producing data that's free and actually more accurate than anyone else could do. This is a kind of application that people came up with. This one is a little project on the web where they asked tell us what you call a drink in a can. And if you live in Texas, pretty much you call it Coke. If you live in California, pretty much you call it soda. All across the Northwest and the Midwest, you call it pop. And this is the result of 130,000 people responding to this message, telling the organizers what they call pop and where they live. Fascinating. What's going on in St. Louis? Why do they call it soda in St. Louis, but in the rest of Missouri they call it pop? There's all sorts of weird patterns. What's going on in North Carolina and Virginia? Why is it so confused? Why don't North Carolinians agree on what to call a beverage in a can? So this sort of thing started people thinking, how can a community create maps, create geographic data, do it cheaply and easily as volunteers? And this is just one of the very first of many, many examples now of this kind of activity. So one of the things we've been talking about the last couple of days and driving over here is, what's the equivalent in this community? What can you do to try to create maps of the community and use the willingness of people to volunteer? So that's how I got associated with this idea of volunteer geographic information. Previously, everybody relied on government, or they relied on companies like Rand McNally. Now, you can volunteer, you can do it yourself. Right. So here's where we currently are. This is Seattle, and in the upper right is my house, 3334 Northeast Blakely Street. And my wife and I are going to the ballet, and we want to figure out how to best to get there. We're going to drive to McCall Hall, which is down on the left. And so we've gone to Google, and Google, fabulously, for free, has told us how to get there. And they're saying, and this is very typical of Seattle, it's going to take you 23 minutes to travel the 5 miles. That's, what, 10 miles an hour? And Interstate 5, which is all there in red, is going to be hopelessly congested, but eventually you're going to get there. And what's more, Google has told me some alternative routes. And you might notice, you won't be able to see it from where you are, but you might notice that the one on the right is actually shorter in distance, but takes longer in time. And the one on the left is further in distance, but faster in time. So all sorts of interesting things can come out of this. And of course, we do this every day. We do it millions of times. But from my perspective, what's really interesting here is the data. Where did this data come from? There's masses of data. Well, all the traffic data came from tracking cell phones. And it came from sensors in the roads and overhead cameras. And all that gets digested and combined into information about traffic. And the traffic information is real time. It's updated all the time. And Google knows the location of every house. I mean, I gave it my street address, it put me on the map. And so there's what, 1 million street addresses in Seattle. Also, it knows about every what we call points of interest. And there must be, I would guess, 10 million points of interest. So what's the role of the community here, apart from getting stuck in traffic? The role of the community is making sure this information is up to date. How often have you gone to looking for a restaurant, following Google, and when you got there, the restaurant's closed? Very frustrating. So what do? You send a message to Google. This restaurant's now closed. And so that's how they keep the information up to date. So interesting question, local community. How does the community keep itself up to date on the businesses, on all the things that are happening in the community? How do you constantly, and the answer typically is volunteers. It's people volunteering information about the community. Okay, but there's a dangerous side here. This comes from the New York Times, who somehow, and we don't know how, acquired 300 million records of where particular devices, cell phones were, at particular times. And it's a no-brainer because you know the device that was pinged, that was located. It's a no-brainer to string together all of the data from a single device. So this is 8,600 over a period of 3 months, 8,600 places that that device was in this neighborhood. And it's the same device, so we can assume it was the same person. So what do we get out of this? What we get out of this is a track of where this person went. And we get to know where the person lives, where the person's doctor lives, what kind of doctor this person visits, where the person's boyfriend lives, what this person was doing out here in the boonies, going to the airport, all sorts of information. How did this happen? This is major invasion of privacy. This is easily finding out more information than we really should. What's going on? Well, every time you install an app on your smartphone, you probably don't check the terms and conditions because it runs to often almost 100 pages. But hidden in there, you may find that the person who sold you the app has the right to keep track of where you are. And that information is then assembled and sold on to marketing companies, all kinds of applications. So this is scary. And how many of you, for example, use the Weather Channel app on your smartphone? Does anybody? Do you know who owns the Weather Channel? IBM. IBM owned the Weather Channel because this kind of data has value, and they can get it from your app. So it's scary. Next time you install an app, for goodness sake, read, at least scan the terms and conditions to see what they can do with the data that they're going to get. Because there are many, many apps that do this. And as I say, it's scary. It's not quite as scary as you might think, because here, for example, is the location of the person who owns this device, because the tracks keep going back to this location. And it's a single-family house, and we can look up easily to find out who that person is. And the New York Times got this person to agree to be identified in this story that they put together. But notice, this is a single-family house. If this person lived in a duplex or in an apartment building, we probably couldn't tell which apartment they lived in. So we probably couldn't tell who it was. So there are limits to how accurately you can do this. But if you own a single-family house, you're more likely to have your privacy invaded if you're not careful. So kind of a scary aspect of the whole business of geographic data, GIS, and smartphone apps. Okay, I want to switch now to some comments about emergency response. Because one thing you learn very quickly, if you think about using these technologies to deal with emergencies is that they're hugely important. And so we'll start with this example. This is the Alfred P. Murrah building, or it was, in Oklahoma City, that was destroyed in an explosion in the early 90s by Timothy McVeigh and a couple of his collaborators. They took a pickup truck, filled the bed with about a ton of explosive, and parked it in front of the Murrah building. It exploded at 9 o'clock in the morning, and unfortunately, because it was parked in the front of the building, the blast destroyed the structure immediately above it, including the daycare center. So there was a horrendous loss of life, and there were many children killed in the explosion. All right. So, what happens next? And if you're faced with something like this, if you think of yourself as being in Oklahoma City, trying to respond to a major disaster like this, the first thing you need is maps. You need maps of where the hospitals are, where the evacuation routes are. You need the floor plan of the building, because you want to be able to reconstruct how it collapsed. And you need all sorts of geographic information that you can pull together in the form of maps. So very quickly after the explosion, they assembled lots and lots and lots of data and started managing the response. If you know Oklahoma City, the Murrah building, of course, is now gone. They tore it down, and there is a very moving memorial to the whole thing, to the bombing, including memorials to each of the people who were killed. So the lesson here is that geographic data maps, GIS, are hugely important in responding to an emergency. Okay? So if I could move on to this disaster, which is the World Trade Center, was the World Trade Center in 2001, the 11th of September. It's a very similar pattern. The two towers collapse along with several other buildings, and immediately we need maps to deal with the emergency. And in this case, it took about 72 hours for the mapping center to be established and start producing maps. So the maps could be used for the people who were digging in the pile to find bodies, and to deal with a whole lot of other kinds of issues that arose because of the explosion. All right. So much bigger scale. The number of deaths in World Trade Center was in the thousands compared to 100 or so in the Murrah building. So again, same point, right? With good maps and good geographic data, you can respond to emergencies much more effectively than, so think about the kinds of emergencies you have in this community. Flash floods, perhaps fires, and think about the kinds of maps that you would need as a community to deal with those emergencies. And just one last one. This is wildfire in California, and this is what we now know as the Oakland Hills Fire, which was which burned in the hills right behind Berkeley, and about 20, in the low 20s, people were killed in the fire. And the real disastrous thing about this was that all those people were in cars. They were trying to escape the fire, and because the community has very narrow streets and very steep slopes. The congestion meant that the cars were overtaken by the fire. So here's some illustrations from the fire. You can see the fire there burning up above the Claremont Hotel in Berkeley. So we took this in Santa Barbara because we had big problems with potential disasters in Santa Barbara. And we identified Mission Canyon as a neighborhood which might go in a similar way to the Oakland Hills, where people might well, in trying to get out of the neighborhood in cars, might well be overtaken by fire. So this is a simulation. Each of these spikes is a driveway, and this is some time after the fire has started and the evacuation has started. The red dots, which you hopefully can just about see, are cars that people are trying to get out of the neighborhood. It's similar to the Oakland Hills in that all these streets are narrow, they're very steep, and so by simulating like this, we can get some idea of how to plan for, how to deal with the emergency. There are many ideas about how you might deal with it. Number one would be somehow to persuade people not to leave in their cars, but to walk or run, because then there won't be congestion, they won't be caught, and certainly a human life is worth more than a car. So there are also other options, like there are places in this network where we can open a gate, provide other access, easier access. So this allows us then to start making some decisions about how to deal with the threat of a fire in Mission Canyon. So thankfully, this work was done, I've been getting on for 20 years ago. Thankfully, there hasn't been a serious fire in Mission Canyon. Okay, so that's the emergency management kind of area, which I'm suggesting is a big application area for maps, GIS, and particularly in the scale of the community. I thought I might do something a little bit different. So are there any questions or comments so far? Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, how is GIS and mapping and the data collection, huge amounts of data here. How is AI maybe interfacing to run alternate scenarios or,
Yeah.
or worst case scenarios?
Lots of ways, and lots of very specific ways. So now that we have a lot of AI tools, those tools are proving to be very useful in creating data, particularly in working with data to improve its quality, to improve the integrity of the data. So that's one. We will also tend to use AI to identify areas that are vulnerable, susceptible to various kinds of emergencies. So AI is all through this. And at this point in time, I think it's probably too early to say exactly how in the long term AI is going to be useful. But certainly it's going to have a major role to play. Yeah. Okay, this one's a little bit different. This is a really powerful way of using maps and GIS. So this is London in England on the left, and it's an outbreak of cholera which occurred in London in 1854 and killed approximately 700 people. And on the map on the left, you can see dots. Those are the locations, home locations of the people who died. And you may recognize, if you know London at all, You've got Piccadilly Circus down at the bottom, and you've got Oxford Circus at the top, and Regent Street, and Carnaby Street is right in there, of Beatles fame. And this is Dr. John Snow, who is now known as the father of epidemiology. The use of maps and analyses like the one I'm going to describe to solve the problems of disease. Because at the time, 1854, really no one knew how cholera passed through a population. And so John Snow, who got very involved in this because he lived right there on the map in Golden Square, and got very involved in figuring out what was causing this outbreak, he focused on what people believed at the time, which was that you got cholera because the air was foul, or what they called miasma. And miasma could be associated with poverty and with poor ventilation and with lack of running water and lack of sewage disposal. All of those things could combine to create a public health disaster. And he thought, well, that sounds reasonable, but he noticed when he made this map that the bulk of the dots were circled around one particular location on the map, which is marked with a cross, but you can't see it very easily, but which is a water pump. And he noticed that the water pump was dead center of this outbreak. So he thought, maybe it's the water. Maybe I should look into the water. And so he worked through the community and interviewed a lot of people, and was particularly concerned with people who were closer to other sources of water. They didn't use necessarily, they weren't closest to the pump. And so he wondered whether they were still drinking water from the pump. And the answer was yes. They actually preferred the water from the pump. They didn't mind walking that extra distance to get the water. So, based on this evidence, he took a dramatic choice and locked the pump, prevented people from using it for drinking water. And the cholera outbreak died out. And so as a result of this, London invested heavily in running water supply and in sewage disposal. And today, these things have greatly improved public health. And of course, we don't these days see cholera as a major disease in cities. So what do we learn from this? We learn that a map can be a vital clue in figuring out something as important as what causes cholera. And it can also be, and Snow's work can also be, a dramatic change in public health in a city. So all of the effort to install sewage systems, drinking water systems in London, all came from this one event. So I want to, if you visit London now, there is a replica of the pump. It's not the real pump, and it's not quite in the right location, but it's in Broad Street. And that's me standing there during COVID. And right next to me on my right, is the John Snow pub, where you can go and have a beer and celebrate the memory of Dr. John Snow and buy the t-shirt. So just to bring this up to date, here's something else which has happened just in the last few years. This is the city of Wuhan in China, and there's been a lot of discussion of where COVID started. And one of the theories is that it started in a market in the middle of that blob where live animals were being sold for human consumption. And These dots are the locations of some of the early infections in Wuhan. Okay? So that looks remarkably like John Snow's map, right? And if you were John Snow, you might well think we've discovered the source, the original source of COVID. Right? But there's also a widespread belief that the source was actually a virology lab, but the virology lab is nowhere near that blob. It's off to the right of this map. So you might think here that the geographic evidence, the evidence of the map, points clearly to the market as the source of the cholera outbreak. All right. So what I've done essentially is run 1854 through to thinking about current health issues. So what do we see as the big picture? There's been an explosion of data. We're far better off now than we've ever been in the past for geographic data, for maps. And the Earth has an enormous surface area. It's about 500 trillion square meters. And those 500 trillion are being imaged over and over and over again every few hours at accuracies of less than a meter. Right? And we have billions of cell phones, and they're being tracked every few minutes. And in all of our major cities, we have cameras, TV cameras. It's estimated that in London now there are over 10 million cameras. And so we seriously have to think that we're at a point where it's possible to know where everything is at all times. That raises the privacy question. Do you want government to know where you are? But it also offers enormous potential if you're managing livestock, for example. The average herd of cows these days, we know where every cow is because they're carrying sensors. And what's more, only a minute fraction of these data will ever be examined by humans. We have to have AI just to look at the data because there's just so much of it. And it's getting more and more and more. So to come back to your question, one of the biggest applications of AI is simply to deal with the volumes of data, to do something useful. So here's an example of the kinds of things we can do these days. This is the work of Wei Li at Arizona State. She's interested in detecting craters. And this is an application of AI, machine learning. You feed it, you train it on some known craters, and then you unleash it over the entire Earth's surface, over the 500 trillion square meters. Right? And you look for things that are similar. So this has become one of the biggest, most exciting applications of AI in the task of finding similar places. Think what you could do, finding places that are similar to Nolanville, using the kinds of data resources that we have today to find sister cities or places that have similar problems that we can learn from. So find similar is something we never used to be able to do, or certainly couldn't do with the kind of volumes of data that we can now handle. She's also been working on landing sites on Mars, taking enormous amounts of images of Mars and searching them for suitable landing sites. Similar kind of problem. And I think this is my last one. This is Austin. This is the UT campus, and there's the football stadium in the middle. And this is what we call a digital twin. The key thing is the question of whether this is a photograph or was it computer generated? Was it generated from the enormous amounts of data that we now have, or is it simply a photograph taken perhaps from a drone? Any bets, any suggestions? Is this a photograph, or is it generated from computer?
Generated.
It's generated, yeah. And why would you know that? The green stuff? Ah, right. Yeah, the vegetation. Doing natural vegetation is difficult in computer simulation. But the most telling thing is that the cars have gone. And the people have gone. Right? Because it's easy to simulate the structures, the buildings, and do a good job of representing them as if they would appear in a photograph. But it's much more difficult to simulate where the cars are and where the people are. So I have a way of looking at images like that. I say a digital twin is almost always a picture of a city on Sunday morning. Because we can't deal with the people. So we're making a lot of progress. We're building digital models of cities, building digital twins. The ideal is a wonderful idea that you can simulate what-if scenarios. You can say, what if I removed the stadium? Or what if I replaced it with something else? What would it look like? And that's the basic idea behind digital twins. But we're a long way from doing that if you're interested in the human aspects, the cars, the human behavior, the people. Yeah, the answer is this is computer simulation. Yeah. And I think that's my last. So thanks very much for listening. I hope this has been interesting. What I tried to do is give you some ideas of where this field is and where it's going, and how that might relate to your particular issues here in the wonderful town of Nolanville, and some ideas that might drive further activity. I think the overall message ought to be that a lot of what we're seeing here is not something that's best done by government or by government agencies or by big companies. It's best done by communities. And there are a lot of examples here of how activities of a community, almost entirely voluntary, combined with the kind of power that we have now in technology, can do wonderful things. So thank you for your attention.
So now we're going to open the floor for questions for Dr. Goodchild.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the cars, the Google cars that drive around,
Yeah.
what data are they collecting?
An enormous amount of data that they need for their own navigation. So you have to know how far you are from the curb, where you are relative to the striping on the highway, where you are in the lane. You have to know how close you are to another car, and all those things are sensed by the vehicle itself. So it uses essentially radar to identify other vehicles and people. And on a Tesla, for example, you would see an image like this generated by the computer of what it's able to see. That's all generated by the autonomous vehicle. What it has to rely on a central data source for is knowing where it's going. It can pick up information about what it can see, local information, but when it wants to go to my house or to McCall Hall, it needs to know where those are, and it can't see those. Right? They have to come from a database. So the route planning is done from the database, but the actual detailed navigation is done from the sensors.
I have one
Yeah.
question. I think these now maps are kind of infrastructure for a lot of services, especially for emergency, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe you can give us some insights on how AI can help update, like keep the maps update, keep the data update.
Yeah.
Typically for
Yeah. Well, one big application of AI is when you're working with images from space or images from aircraft. So remote sensing, photographs that have been taken of the Earth's surface. And it may be a day like today where there are patches of cloud. And so the cloud doesn't tell you anything. AI can be used to replace the cloud with a reasonable simulation of what there might be under the cloud. You can't take it too far, of course, because it can't really see what it's looking for. It's not omnipotent, but you can at least make a reasonable guess as to the gaps in the image or gaps in the coverage. You could say something similar about this, that AI might be used to explore parts of that image that I can't see because they're not in the database. So parts such as the interior of the buildings, I might use AI to try to guess what's inside those buildings. So lots of examples where the data that I have is not fully complete and needs to be augmented by some intelligent choices. Yeah. Yeah.
So, why is there still so much question about the origin of COVID? You show the what?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, but did you show the lab and did you show?
No, it's not on that map. It's, but it's not very far away. Yeah, there we go. The lab is over here among the lakes. Yeah, I, as a geographer, I would take this. I would say the geographic evidence seems clear that it was the market. But the CIA, in its wisdom, has decided it was the virology lab. Maybe they have other evidence. I don't know where it was from. So it remains controversial. But as an example of what Snow did, run forward to today, I think it works very well. So I think the controversy will continue. I don't think we can escape that. And apart from anything else, it's now politicized.
So I have received a few questions from the audience who are not able to make it today.
Where are they?
They're from the students. They said not make, but they sent questions to me. So there's one question here. What is one way that GIS changed lives in the next 10 years that most people do not realize?
Most people don't realize now how it's going to change lives in the next 10 years. Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, one thing that's going to change our lives in the next 10 years is the enormous growth in data centers. And data centers are going to have great impact on daily life. We're already seeing the beginnings of a ramping up of the cost of electric power. We will see the impacts of the use of water by data centers. There are reports coming in now of people whose wells have run dry because they're located near a data center which is sucking up all the water. So that whole massive move into AI and data centers is going to have enormous impact on our daily lives. I don't think we can escape that. And that's in addition to the impact in terms of employment and the use of AI to take over, also to be an alternative to human interaction. Yeah. I think, yeah. Coming down the pike in the next 10 years, I think, are a lot of some things that are really central to the technology itself. And one is quantum computing. We are going to see quantum computing in the next few years. It is going to be enormously faster, and it's going to allow us to do things that our current computing can't do because it's not fast enough. So this would include applications of AI to things like agriculture, the use of AI to improve response to weather extremes, improve response to things like flash floods. And this will change our lives. I don't think we can escape that. This is the going way beyond our... I showed you the example of Mission Canyon, where there was simulation, but it was a very crude simulation. Quantum computing is going to open up the possibility of far more sophisticated simulations of how the world looks and how the world works. Yeah.
I have a question that's slightly off topic a little, but you brought it up. When does AI or the scientists think we're going to go to Mars, land on Mars?
Ooh.
What is the estimated time period?
Well, it's not next week. No, it's the problems of doing that are absolutely enormous. Apart from
I can't fathom it, but I'm not.
no, just how long it takes to get there, and all the problems of actually living there. The movie does The Martian does a good job of giving us a sense of what life on Mars would be like. And it's a scary movie, and if you're contemplating going to Mars.
No, there's too many places here.
Right, I agree. No, I don't think we're...
If AI keeps multiplying itself in the next few decades, AI is going to be the one that solves those kind of problems. Right?
Yeah.
I can't imagine living there.
No.
We're getting there, but
No.
AI is going to get us there, right?
Well, but the fundamental barriers will always be there, and one is how long it takes to get to Mars. We can't reduce that, essentially. How much energy it takes to launch a vehicle to Mars, the risks of being there, which the movie does a really good job of making clear. Yeah, I
I mean, like 100 years ago, they never thought we'd be on the moon.
no. But we did a bang-up job of that. That was an amazing experience. Yeah, not next week. It's going to take a long time and a lot of dedicated effort. And we need some sense of why, what the advantage is going to be if we can get there. mining is hard to sell, I think, as a justification for the enormous effort that this would involve, the enormous risk.
Do we even know
No.
what the surface is? What's under the surface on Mars?
Yeah, we've got some good ideas these days. So there's water not far below the surface. So there's a lot of increasing evidence that there has been life at some point in the past. Yeah.
So I have a question about the mapping efforts you were introducing about the maps, like people putting the paper maps into the electronic forms, and that itself can tell a lot of stories, and they also introduce the elegant maps of those disease outbreaks and deaths, which I think is very inspirational. And my question is that the current trend is that the digital maps has become more and more complicated at this moment, and it becomes very hard for young researchers, like smaller researchers, to be able to put something that does not exist into the digital form and make in a map form.
Yeah.
And from what I see on those maps that you provided, it looks like all of those are facts. So I'm just wondering, to what extent do you think like simulated results or synthetic things that potentially can be generated with lower costs and lower efforts would be useful in terms of making
I've been at that edge often between GIS as pure technology, GIS being the application of very rigorous procedures on the one hand, and then on the other hand, art and aesthetics on the other. And I got very excited a while back with the concept of geodesign, which I saw as finally providing a bridge. This would allow you to use a GIS to create a plan and then allow you to evaluate the plan aesthetically and perhaps have the community help. So in a sense, this is the process of co-design, using technology and using the community to produce a plan which is acceptable, as widely acceptable as possible. I think that's a really exciting area for GIS. I often used to say that you can put just about anything into a GIS except something subjective like sense of place. But we've come a long way, and today we can. So if there are intangibles, subjective evaluations, we can do it. We may have to put them in as text. We may have to use ChatGPT to do it, but we can do it. The technology is not as limited as it was. So early critiques of the technology that says this is nothing but machines. You've taken the humans out. No, I think we've made a lot of progress in putting the humans back in. You can see it all the time. In that example I gave of going from my house to McCall Hall, you think about how the computer, how Google has bridged the gap between the spatial, the coordinates, the latitude and longitude on the one hand, and the place names on the other. And we do a lot today with bridging that gap. Because as humans, we don't use latitude and longitude. I doubt if anybody in this room really has any good idea of what our latitude and longitude is at this point. But we all know we're in Nolanville. And so these technologies allow us to bridge that gap between what we would call the spatial latitude and longitude and the placial, the place names. And that's opened up, I think, a whole lot of exciting areas for this technology. We have lots and lots of information in our heads about places. We have ideas about Austin, Texas, and College Station. And yet, because they're in our heads and not in the technology, we're not in a position to share those ideas. But with these kinds of placial ideas, you can. So I think we're making good progress in humanizing the technology and moving the human into the loop. Yeah.
There's another question here is that if here we have parents, we have grandparents from Nolanville come attending this beautiful event. What is the message that you would like them to bring back to their children, to their grandkids, about what you have learned today about this event?
Well, I think that last point is well worth emphasizing. Don't think of this as pure technology. Think of it as collaboration between the machine and the human. And with tools like AI, we've got a lot better at doing that in the past decade than we ever were in the past. I hope my new addition to the family, my great-granddaughter, will grow up with a very clear view of not only what the technology can do, but also what its weaknesses and the concerns are. And I've touched on some of those. The privacy concern, obviously, is one. And there are many others. I hope that, I would say the same for students. I think that there's been a lot of questions recently. What should we expect students to know about AI? And not just how to do ChatGPT. And I think the answer is they need to be critical and concerned with the caveats of the technology. They need to know as much about what the technology can do as what it can't, or what is in it versus what's missing. One of the biggest questions in GIS is, what do you not have in your machine? And it's essential that you have a clear impression of that. There's a lovely illustration of, it's a painting by Johannes Vermeer, made in 1668, that's titled The Geographer. And it's a beautiful painting. It's a classic Vermeer, worth billions if it ever came on the market. And there are maps and globes, very faithfully replicated. And the key point is that the geographer is at a desk and has maps unfolded in front of the geographer and globes behind. But the cartographer, the geographer, is looking out of the window. The implication being, there's no way, with all the maps in the world, that you can solve the world's problems without actually looking at the world. Because the maps will never have all the information that's important. So that's why I think coming here tonight on a field trip is such an important part. I mean, we could have visited virtually, but the fact that we came here allowed us to really get a sense of what the real world is like, not how it's represented in some technology.
Yeah. Nolanville is such a beautiful city with a lot of doers, a lot of volunteers.
Yeah.
In the past years, many. It's really, really awesome that we have a lot of volunteers in Nolanville who are so passionate about making this community better,
Yeah.
giving their time back to communities. And I was wondering if what would you suggest initial take, if they might be benefit from using GIS to help the community better.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if we were to focus on the maps, the first thing I want to know is what maps are we missing? We have standard maps, so we have street maps, we have maybe geologic maps, hydrologic maps, but what are we missing? And if you're thinking about handling a potential disaster like flash flooding, what do we need in the way of maps to deal with that? I used to do a lot of consulting in GIS, and when we went to meet with some customers, our first question would always be, what do you need to know? What do you need maps of? Then the next question would be, what data do you need to make those maps? And then the next one would be, what software do you need to make the maps? But it was the maps that were always the most important. So as a community, I think a collective examination of whether the community is sufficiently well mapped to address its future needs and the potential for disasters, hazards. What do you have in the way of maps that would allow you to deal with a major derailment on the railway, on the railroad that's going through the town? That's a potential disaster. And maps would be needed. You need to know where the disaster is going to occur and how to respond to it in terms of how to access that particular location, what its impact would be on the river, the stream systems. Asking, what do we need in the way of maps that we can use to address future issues and current issues?
It's interesting that you mentioned about disaster. So I moved here from California a little over a year ago. One of the places we were looking at buying a house was Nolanville.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why, two of the reasons why I didn't want to be that far away from my daughter and grandchildren, but the other reason is that when they put this new neighborhood, it was next to an existing neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it was clearly one way in and one way out, and I was not comfortable with that at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
In case of a disaster.
Yeah. 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 Another aspect of the Mission Canyon, one reason we focused on Mission Canyon was because we had made a map of Santa Barbara. And the purpose of the map was to rate every point in the city in terms of its ability to get out. And we did that by, we didn't know how big the disaster was going to be, the evacuation was going to be. So we ran the analysis for increasing sizes of disasters. And then we said for each disaster, how many exits are there? And how many people have to exit through that one channel? And that gave us a map of the biggest risks. And these are typically bottlenecks, right? These are parts of the city where there's only a single way in, way out. And so that's a major issue. And Mission Canyon was one of those areas. And so you then start working on the mitigations. What can you do to reduce the potential for major fire? And one was the simulations that I showed. Another was to rent 100 goats and release them on the hills above Mission Canyon so they ate everything that was flammable, right? 100 goats. That was a really cool move, I thought.
That's a great idea. What's wrong with that idea?
Nothing at all. They did it, and it worked.
Before or after their huge fire out there
Oh,
that you did the consulting?
well, this one. No, this was hypothetical. But the
I mean, they had one, was it, I can't remember what it was.
the Thomas Fire.
Huh?
The Thomas Fire was huge. Burned a lot of Santa Barbara, and then it was followed by a big mudslide. And that killed 20-some people.
And what's that little town behind it? There's a college there.
Ojai?
I guess so, I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oprah Winfrey lives there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a dangerous area. After we moved there in the first year,
Oh, you lived there too?
in Santa Barbara, yeah.
Yeah.
We had had a major earthquake, major fire, the Rodney King riots, and there was one more. I mean, it was just welcome to California.
Well, my best friend from college, her husband does a lot of business online, so every summer they go from Minnesota, they go out there in the wintertime, they come back to
Yeah.
Minnesota in the summertime, to Santa Barbara, and
Yeah.
rent or lease. They love it. Their daughter stayed out there.
Oh, it's, yeah. Beautiful place. Yeah. Yeah. Except when it's burning.
Any other questions? We can have one more question for Dr. Goodchild. We do not see a fellow of a National Science Academy every day. So let's take this opportunity. One more question.
Well, have you applied any of this to exploring whether there is life on other worlds?
Ooh. No. No, I've done a bit of exploring whether there is life in caves, which is much more straightforward. And I've done quite a lot of mapping caves, which is kind of fun. There's one view which says a cave can be an enormously complicated three-dimensional thing, and to try to express it on a flat sheet of paper is virtually impossible. So mapping caves, I think, is one of the most challenging problems of mapping. But no, not. I think we always think of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence as a matter of searching point by point, rather than mapping. And I don't think we've come anywhere close to being able to see potential places in sufficient detail to make maps of them.
Well, related to that, how much of the under the oceans have you been able to map?
Yeah.
Not you personally, but the subject area.
Yeah. It's been a big area because it's 2/3 of the planet.
Yes.
And the techniques of mapping are really quite tricky. Sonar is probably the best. It's just pinging from sound sensors. But also the oceans are three-dimensional, and you want to get the three-dimensional structure. So you can map the ocean surface temperature, but you also want to go below to pick out things like currents. So a lot of work.
We've never discovered yet. I mean.
Yeah. One of my students went down in the Alvin and has been to the lowest point on the oceans. This is Dawn Wright. The Marianas Trench off the Far East. I couldn't do it. God. It's so cramped in those things, and they're very noisy. They make creaking noises.
And yet you go in caves that you can't hardly crawl.
Well, yeah.
Sleep in.
Yeah, but caves are warm and welcoming. They're warm and welcoming compared to the ocean.
Oh, they have snakes and things.
Yeah, mostly around the entrance, though.
Oh,
Copperheads are the nasty ones. Yeah. No, she's written books on mapping the oceans, and been there in the field. So she's pretty remarkable.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Okay.
Goodchild, for sharing stories with us. There is a lot of new things that we've learned today, and very, very importantly, we remember your words about GIS is a technology, it's about the collaboration between people and machines.
Yes.
So let's everybody please join us and give Dr. Goodchild another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's such a beautiful Friday evening, and it is such a unique opportunity. I'd like to propose that everybody, let's capture this beautiful moment as having a picture together as a moment, so that we can send it to everybody. And I think, how about that? Let's do it. So all the students come over to the front, and you can sit here on the floor. Then we can have a row of chairs in here, so people can sit. Now,